Good morning, everybody. Tom Kaczynski here. It's about 7:30 a.m., November 11th, 2023, Armistice Day or Veterans Day, depending on where you live. So God bless the veterans. More of us are probably going to be them in the not-too-distant future. The hints that we're heading towards war grow all the time. If you watch channels like Monkey Works or any of the other ones that cover this, you can see the movement of troops and personnel is quickly accelerating. The end of the Standard Force Treaty on Europe, conventional forces in Europe treaty, means that NATO, as well as the Russians and their allies, are moving forces all over the map. And of course, forces have been moving very quickly to the Middle East, as well as the Baltic Sea. Don't sleep on that. A lot of the Europeans are moving forward there amidst rumors that the Russians may try to reabsorb the old Baltic states in. And realistically, it's long been thought there's not much you could do. Maybe a little bit of resistance would be around Riga if that happens. Not that I think Russia's about to start World War III, but hey, things happen. Things can go funny very quickly. It's something to be aware of. It's no accident we've been giving Ukraine long-range missiles as the last thing we give them before Zelensky gets purged. The idea is to destroy some of their S-400 defense capacity because American warfare doctrine, and European for that matter as an offshoot, requires air supremacy, which in the age of hypersonic missiles and advanced air defense you probably won't see. So anyway, good morning. Jumping in a little on the deep end, but that's what you want, to drink from the fire hose. So welcome. I am Tom Kaczynski, the Venmo CVC PRV, PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739. Rather than trying to tell you everything that's happening, we're going to jump around the map today. But I had someone ask me to tell me how money works, and I had this great little story that I think is the best way to describe it. And it describes a lot of the problems in our culture and why we're heading towards the war. It's a little parable I made up, and it might be funny or it might not. Let's try, a little bit of humor. So imagine we lived way back when, and that the value in the world came from two things. We'll call them drabs and dribs. The drab could be a little shiny piece, a silvery piece. A drib could be even worth more, maybe a golden shiny piece. And at one point, someone said, hey, all this stuff is out there. We really love this. So they built a temple to the drabs and the dribs, and ultimately people said, oh, well, these people can determine how good they are. And they would bring them to the people at the temple of the drabs and dribs, and what they would do eventually is they said, these are wonderful. We will hold them and protect them as sacred assets. And since they were sacred assets, they gave you a different thing. They gave you the drub. And the drub was a piece of paper that talked about all the drabs and dribs you would ever have. And eventually, everyone was like, I want a drub, I want a drub. And since they trusted the shiny thing, they trusted the value of the drub. But the people who had it, they never knew how many drabs and dribs they had or what they did with it. They just got the drubbing that came on the other side. But they couldn't get away from the drubs because at the end of the day, they couldn't agree on anything having value but drabs and dribs because, after all, that had value forever. And so we would just go ahead and take the drubbing. And even if the drubbing didn't give us as much, at least we knew someone had it. And we had faith enough in that system to be sure that we would continue. Even when the drubbing got to the point where the interest payment was over $1 trillion, the country was $33 trillion in debt. Generational slavery had become years, but we couldn't agree on anything else. We didn't want the war of the jungle. We wanted to be civilized, so we took the drubbing. Sound familiar? That's basically the story of how society is ordered around money, and maybe at some point we change that. I don't know, but I will tell you one thing. What might happen is one temple might decide your drubbing isn't worth that much anymore, and that's the American dollar, because we've used it as a weapon, which was the most foolish thing they could have done with the Russian war, because ultimately everyone was content taking that, because at least it was understood, and now we're fighting over the value of money that has no value, with a country nobody, with good cause, wants to fight for a system that hates its own. That's where we're at in this scenario, and that's why I say when this goes down, it's going to go down fast and hard, so you better start thinking ahead to what you're going to organize around. I'll give you a hint. When material wealth goes away, people are going to find moral structures after a bloodletting, and they're going to demand society has better structure. The reason the Dark Ages had such a constrictive church is because people saw that they had a need for that. They're going to solve the problem of hypergamy, for instance, the idea that, anyone sleeps with anyone. That's going to go away. Marriage is going to be restrictive, and I'm not trying to remake The Handmaid's Tale. It's not about that. It's about the fact that problems will need to be solved, and once violence is opened up as a possibility, it will be used much more strongly. So, We're going to look at the world a little bit. We're going to look at some problems. I'm going to read you a brief story. We're going to go to Spain for a minute. Now, to give you a little preface, I'm going to read a thread on Twitter by a user named Iberian Spirit, but you can find something else. But I read this. I thought it was a fair description. Spain has had an interesting few years. They had their own breakaway secessionist movement. I think it was back in 2017 in Catalonia, the wealthy northeastern part of Spain, around which Barcelona and some other cities are found. And they wanted to break away, and much in the same way the Scots do from the UK. And you see movements like this, sometimes Venice from Italy. It was primarily a left-wing nationalist movement. Right-wing nationalist movements are sent to jail. You know how that goes. But they were, ultimately, they voted for it, and nothing happened. So what eventually happened is a couple elections later, socialists get into power, but they don't have enough support, so they start cutting deals with the separatists and the secessionists. And the Spanish nationalists, the right party, gets mad about it. So what do? They assassinate the leader of the guy. It's called the Vox Party, the voice of the people. And when we mean far right, think of something like UKIP or like the ADF in Germany, AFD rather. My apologies, Alternative for Deutschland. So the guy gets shot and he gets killed. And we've seen this, by the way. A lot of this happens in Ecuador and Latin America, but the first world is the third world now, so these things happen. So now riots are starting about people who are fighting over identity. They're literally marching in the streets saying, España es cristiana, no es muslima. You can translate that pretty quickly in your own mind, I'm sure. So let's give you that as a backup, and I'm going to read you this little bit. This is from @IberianSpirit, a brief thread about what's happening in my country in Spain. Okay. After the last elections, the president of the Socialist Party, he's been the president of Spain for the last years, has been organizing pacts with the far left and the separatist parties. There are several in order to seek their support to be able to stay in power. After having obtained the majority of support necessary to govern, because this is a multi-party system, you understand how those work, he still needed the support of one of the Catalan pro-independence parties, which demanded amnesty for Catalan politicians convicted of crimes. And like I said, Catalonia is the region of northeast Spain, rather. It used to be the Kingdom of Aragon way back when. Okay. In the agreement between both parties, it has been agreed not only the amnesty, but a referendum of self-determination for the national recognition of Catalonia, financial autonomy for Catalonia, and that Catalonia collects 100% of the taxes paid in Catalonia. So that would be like if, to use an example we know, if it's not too dissimilar, what Quebec would do in Canada, or what Texas could do in the U.S. It'd be like, okay, all of our money we collect in Texas now stays in Texas, none of it goes to Washington. Could you see how every other state would be pissed off? Or, more likely here, that deal would be given to California, since Newsom's been busy parroting around with Xi. Keep in mind, by the way, Xi Jinping's going to be in San Francisco on the 14th. We'll see what happens with that. Worth watching. This, continuing with Iberian Spirit, this, in addition to the very serious aspect of negotiating with the unity of Spain, makes some regions more than others, dividing them into first and second-class regions. Thus, the Spanish state will continue to send millions of euros to Catalonia, but not the other way around. Thus, in order to maintain this system, other regions that are not as developed as Catalonia, such as Andalusia, Extremadura, or Castilla-La Mancha, those are regions mostly in the south and west of Spain, will be affected by severe cuts. To give more money to one part, money has to be taken from another. This president has been negotiating for years with criminals, coup plotters, and people who seek only to destroy Spain. He is an unscrupulous person who will do anything to stay in power, a true tyrant. By the way, this is kind of the background to sort of how the Spanish Civil War a little bit happened. Communists were going out there, and they were killing people, so there was a nationalist response led by the military, and Franco eventually came to power after a long, bloody war in 36 to 38, I believe. As a result of this, Spanish patriots began to protest several nights in a row in front of the Socialist Party headquarters. This protest began to grow larger and larger, and the police began to charge and fire tear gas at the demonstrators who included elderly people and kids. The protests have been spreading to other parts of Spain. Despite this, while these protesters have been branded as violent and radical in all media, it's amazing how the media loves to support nationalism in only one country. And I'll give you a hint. It's not the United States. They can send Lindsey Graham out there and he can say, we're going to defend the southern border. No, you're not. You haven't done it in 20 years. Why are you going to do it now? Why? Because you want more support for Israel? Yeah, right. Anyway, while they are called radicals, separatists who sent fire to the streets of Barcelona in 2017 are called democratic. Paging George Floyd, right? These protests have been characterized by police violence against people, including several arrests. The same police that attacks people who only seek to defend Spain is the police that welcomes illegal immigrants with open arms and does nothing to them when they commit a crime. Add to this fact that important figures such as the king, who is supposed to defend the unity of Spain, have not pronounced themselves in the matter. I don't know how this will end, but Spain has been governed for years by true tyrants who have been destroying Spain, fueling hatred toward the people, toward their own country, through education, making separatism and resentment grow. So this is what's happening here. And like I said, the leader of the Vox Party there actually got assassinated. So it's getting ugly. It's getting bad. And we'll see how it happens over the weekend. But this is an undercurrent. It's stirring where some people are allowed to protest, some aren't. Some people are allowed to be in charge, some aren't. And the purges that happened in the military that were accelerated by the vaccine removal of people, the same people that desperately want back to fight for them now, who aren't coming, and God bless those who are standing on the outside. These are problems that are happening. So the world is a mess. You already know that. And it may become more of a mess today. Nasrallah is supposed to come and speak for Hezbollah again. I'll probably take an eye at that. Once again, if you don't remember, he's the, I think it's the Mufti, if I remember right. He's basically the head cleric over there for the Lebanese, and that fighting has increased a lot. Since we've last talked, Yemeni have shot down the Houthi rebels. They're part of government, kind of, over there. Have shot down an American drone, and the Americans, thinking there's a problem, have done massive bombing runs into Syria to Iranian-backed militias, trying to destroy air support capacities for the ability for goods to be brought in to Syrian airports, or potentially even Lebanese airports, and then given over to Hezbollah, which is why you see all those aircraft carriers over there. And we'll see if that advances. So far, Iran has been pretty cool and laid back about this. What's interesting is Saudi Arabia has been vacillating on both sides, as they will. I mean, Arab politics are a mess. I don't want to get into too much of that there, other than to say keep an eye on Lebanon, because the firing rate between the Lebanese and the Israelis has been increasing, and the rumor has been that a lot of the holdup has been because American air defense assets are trying to be brought into place before any expansion of the war, which Israel is showing no signs of letting up on. I mean, the casualty rate is terrible, and they're destroying the ability of Gaza to be an effective place for people to live. As bad as it was, it's going to be worse. But nobody wants the Palestinians because they're destabilizing. In Egypt, you have a military government who overthrew the same people, the Muslim Brotherhood, who have the same backers basically as Hamas ideologically. And Jordan's already sort of toppling a little bit just because they have a security corps there, has a pro-Western government, but the people there do not want that because there's about 2 million Palestinian refugees there already who have somewhat integrated into there. I mean, there's a country in waiting to take over what was Israel of these sorts of people. We'll see if it emerges. If the Arab Street gets mad enough, it's a possibility. All right, so in that backdrop, let's bring up another story. There was, for the first time today, you can look this up, the B-21 Raider flew for the first time on Friday, a milestone for the Pentagon's first new bomber in a quarter century. Funny, right on time for war, one of those black budget things comes out, and it basically looks like a thinner stealth bomber. It's designed to replace the old B-2. That's a strategic nuclear bomber that goes very far, very fast. It's more hidden. It looks honestly, if you crossed an alien gray, a stingray, and a stealth bomber, that's about what it looks like. An eerie kind of looking craft, but they were flying it around out there, and I don't know how effective it is. They claim it's quite effective, but now we're heading towards war, so the wonder weapons come out because they want you to have confidence. But do check it out. There was a good article on the Drive. Defense One also has a decent review of it, and it's supposed to have a higher range and an easier capacity for radar evasion. I don't know if that's going to be effective or not. The rumors are the Russians have something that is different than radar that can track things. That's how they've been grabbing drones from the air, but we'll see. Another thing I wanted to throw out there is Iceland. So 2 things are happening today. We are going to be hit by a massive CME, apparently. That's a coronal mass ejection. For those of you who don't know, think of when an eclipse happens, how everyone goes kind of wonky, especially the animals. In the same sort of way, we are getting pummeled with magnetic warfare. Magnetic event that's coming from the sun. Maybe God's putting his finger on the thumb here. And when that happens, what you should expect is electronic interruptions, potentially, auroras, and surprisingly lower latitudes, which we see a lot. Temperatures may be slightly warmer than usual. Storms may be more aggressive, and earthquake and volcano activity may be exacerbated. Why do I mention the last one? Because in Iceland, there seems to be a danger of a major earthquake swarm. They had, for instance, 590 earthquakes in the last 6 hours on the southwestern peninsula by a town called Grindavik. If you've ever seen the Blue Lagoon, it's not too far from there, and they think a volcano has a decent chance chance of erupting. The fact that we have a CME coming at the same time, just think of it as basically feeding fuel into a fire. It's like if I went down to my wood stove and started blowing, hydraulic air into it, it's going to make that more likely to erupt. And these are not small things. If you have a big enough volcano erupt, that's what caused the Bronze Age collapse. At least so goes the theory, that you had ash in the air that basically circled the Earth like 2 or 3 times over for about 18 months to 36 months, destroyed the ability of agriculture. And think of like radioactive fallout, sort of how that would operate, but on a lesser scale and more temporary. Same sort of concept there, and it caused people to move south looking for better places. The invasion of the infamous Sea Peoples, who went into Egypt and other places, the end of the Hittite empires, and all those Asian Minor and other empires, which were heavily degraded. And Egypt only survived by the skin of their teeth, really. These massive invasions of crazy warrior white folk from the far northwest of Europe. Presumably, nobody knows exactly where they came from. Maybe it could have been the UK, could have been Iceland, could have been North America for all we know. I'm not sure. Probably not North America, but, history's weird like that. In any case, beyond the history, do keep an eye on that. If that happens, that will be a global catastrophe that will heavily impact agriculture. And if you see that volcano going off bigly, go buy some extra food. I'm just warning you. That could be a game changer to the geopolitical background, or it could just put people in more desperation. Because in the same way governments are fighting one another for control, people are fighting governments and not feeling very happy about the leadership they're having. I do expect massive protests to continue today. We've seen that quite a bit. And, here in the United States, we had a series of elections that, people would question the results out of. Although an interesting theory's emerged, which I think has some validity, that Democrats vote in every election and Republicans only vote in some elections. And that might be true because Republicans now represent the lower class of voters, even though their party doesn't really love them. That's the votes who they're getting, because the other side finds that the left pushes in terms of climate change agendas that just destroy your economic ability to survive is crazy. I mean, they're still out there arguing the economy is fundamentally doing well. I don't know how they do it. Prices on real goods that people care about have more than doubled. The despair index of people who fall from the middle class into poverty is huge. The number of people who are going into public assistance is massive. The ability of people to own homes is just completely collapsing, and the home prices will eventually have to do the same, since no one can afford them at 8% interest. But because a few people are doing well, and because serfdom was kind of the goal, the media goes out there and tells the story, well, this is what we wanted. And maybe it is, but just be mindful. Eventually they're going to offer you something free that isn't going to be free. It's going to be the drib and the drab that's going to leave you drubbed. So if you have your druthers, you might want to handle that a little bit differently. And what we do when that happens, well, that's something you need to be thinking about. Maybe go read my books, they'll give you a hint. The last few were pretty good on that. You can go read, what would be a good choice in that? Because I don't really want to get in. I mean, Coming Civil War is always the classic. Come Out of Babylon's probably good, or Behold the Beast System. But anyway, I'll be here, chatting along the way, letting you know what I'm thinking is what's going on. Other than that, all is pretty well here. I can't complain personally. I will say this, for those of you who are friends of the program, our own process of looking to move to the Southern Hemisphere continues apace. I'm planning on taking a trip, if things hold out, next spring down to Argentina y Chile to take a look on the ground and see what's happening. Just can't do it in wintertime because there's too much that needs to be done around the house. But by then, I think it'd be great if there'd be a few families who want to come along and we could do a little something together. And I've learned something. I've been homesteading the last few years. You guys ask why I don't talk about that. It's not efficient. You just can't do it. You're better off, and I hate to say this, in the short term, you're better off making the money, buying the goods, and developing little skill sets. Get a garden, get a greenhouse, learn how to have the basic skill sets, get self-sufficient on things you can that are easy. Like a wood stove is easy. I mean, and if you want to take it to the next level, and let's say you lived in the woods like I did, and you got a log splitter and, a chainsaw, and you want to learn how to do things, that's fine. But just understand that in the age of automation, most things that we do are not economically efficient. They're an energy sink that takes life, energy, and force off of us. So if you can make things simple and redundant, that's what you'd want to do. That's that sweet spot. I mean, some people are going to be Bear Grylls. That's great. And some people can be full-on farmers and ranchers. God bless you. I know how hard that work is. And most of us will not be able to do that, not the least of which, unless you want to rely on animal labor and you have feed planned out, gas is going to run low at some point if you want to do that sort of thing. But if you want to be able to store some food and be able to grow some things for yourself as supplements for the healthy things you need that you can manage, and, make some money while you can. Not a ton, but enough, and get away and live comfortably in a place where violence isn't the answer to everything, because, frankly, people have lived in poverty too long to care. I mean, people always ask me, why would you go to Argentina? Their currency has never worked. That's exactly why you go to Argentina. You go to Argentina because CBDC is going to have a workaround there, because they've had a workaround for 20 years. And yes, government makes proclamations, but they don't listen to it there. See, here in America, the crisis of America is we're an ideological country. We believe ideologies shape people. In Europe, they don't believe that. They believe there are people who come from areas who have discrete beliefs, and one lives and one dies. And they believe that because history has taught them that. America, up until for a long time, at least since 1860, hasn't had to live that lesson internally. I fear that as things become worse here, and as the despair, suffering grows, the lack of resources, the right sort of tip-off problem will reveal the sort of ugliness of our nature, and the fact that we're not collective, but that we have war of all against all. Like the Purge movies, I think that's actually a pretty accurate way to how it would go, except for the fact there would be leadership, at least for a while. And things would emerge, but it would be rough and violent, and whether you want to be a part of that, well, that's for you to figure out. But if you don't, and you're interested in getting out, shoot me a message. You guys know how to find me. It's not that hard. Or just leave a message here, how to contact you, and I'll do it. I do check these things. All right, so that's what I have for today. I've been trying to keep these to 20 minutes. I think that's worked pretty good. The Venmo CVC PRV, P.O. Box 343, Eagle Lake 04739. And just close with a blessing on you, your families, all of our friends out there. If things break, I will be commenting more, of course. And I just pray that the Lord's will be done. And, if you're doing the Lord's will, you can ask him for protection. That prayer will get his attention. If you're not, well, there's a reason why. The world can't change. The things we need to get fixed can't get fixed when nobody's listening, and we're at that point. So hopefully you're listening. Take some time, read the Bible a little bit this week. Go check the Gospels. The Lord has something for each of you. God bless. You guys have a wonderful day. Father, just look out for all of us in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. See you guys later. Tom Kaczynski out.